I'm about to share something that might make you uncomfortable, but it could be the wake-up call that changes your outlook. For the past decade, we've been sold the lie that being busy equals being productive, that saying yes to everything makes us valuable. But recent studies reveal that 82% of workers are experiencing burnout, with Gen Z and millennials hitting the highest levels of exhaustion. The people who are thriving aren't the ones doing more. They're the ones who've learned to focus on their why, as Simon Sinek teaches us, and discovered the power of strategic self-focus. And it starts with understanding one fundamental truth about what's hijacking your attention every single day. The digital quicksand that's swallowing your soul. Your phone has become a weapon against your own mind. In 2025, 69% of remote employees report digital tool burnout, and it's not hard to understand why. Every notification sound triggers a small hit of dopamine in your brain. This chemical reward system evolved to help our ancestors survive by making them pay attention to important changes in their environment. But now that same system keeps you trapped in a cycle where you crave the next ping, the next like, the next update. Your brain literally adapts to expect these constant interruptions, making sustained attention feel uncomfortable and difficult. When you switch from checking your email to scrolling social media to responding to a text message, you're not just moving between tasks. You're asking your brain to completely restructure its focus multiple times per minute. This constant switching creates what researchers identify as attention residue. Part of your mental energy remains stuck on the previous task, even after you've moved to something new. Think about how your smartphone pinging disrupts your ability to fall asleep at night. Research shows that 74% of people report that sleep affects their mental health, and this fragmented attention follows the same pattern throughout your waking hours. The deeper parts of yourself, the parts that hold your values and authentic desires, require sustained attention to access. Attention residue acts like static that drowns out these quieter, but more important signals. Social media platforms employ teams of neuroscientists and behavioral economists whose entire job is keeping you externally focused. The infinite scroll wasn't designed by accident. The way your feed shows you content that triggers comparison, envy, or outrage isn't a glitch. These features exist because platforms profit when you stay engaged, and you stay engaged when you're looking outside yourself for validation, information, or emotional stimulation. The algorithm learns that you're more likely to engage with content that makes you feel inadequate or anxious about missing out. It feeds you carefully curated glimpses into other people's lives, designed to make you question your own choices and priorities. This external focus becomes addictive because it temporarily relieves the discomfort of looking inward, but it also prevents you from developing the internal compass you need to navigate your own life. Research published in 2025 shows a direct correlation between hours spent on connected devices and reported levels of anxiety and life dissatisfaction. People who spend more than 4 hours daily on smartphones and social media report feeling 40% less satisfied with their lives compared to those who limit their usage to under 2 hours. The correlation holds true across age groups, income levels, and geographic locations. What makes this particularly concerning is that constant connectivity doesn't just make you anxious in the moment. It trains your nervous system to expect stimulation, making ordinary moments feel boring or uncomfortable. The quiet spaces where self-reflection happens naturally start feeling like voids that need to be filled. You lose the ability to sit with your own thoughts without reaching for external input. The people achieving remarkable things in 2025 understand something most people miss. They recognize that attention is their most valuable resource, and they guard it accordingly. They create digital boundaries not to be antisocial, but to preserve the mental space where their best thinking happens. They schedule specific times for checking messages and social media, rather than allowing these activities to interrupt their focus throughout the day. These high performers often describe a phenomenon that seems counterintuitive. The less connected they are to their devices, the more connected they feel to the people and work that matter most to them. They can have deeper conversations because their attention isn't fragmented. They can pursue long-term goals because they're not constantly distracted by short-term stimulations. They can make decisions based on their own values, rather than reacting to whatever external pressure feels most urgent. The paradox of our current moment is striking. We have access to more information, more connection, and more opportunities for communication than any generation in human history. Yet surveys consistently show that people feel more isolated, more anxious, and more disconnected from their sense of purpose than previous generations. The tools designed to connect us have actually created barriers between us and the parts of ourselves that matter most. Breaking free from digital quicksand requires recognizing that your phone and social media apps are designed to capture and monetize your attention. Every feature, every notification, every algorithm update serves the goal of keeping you engaged with external content rather than focused on your internal development. Understanding this isn't about becoming a technology pessimist. It's about becoming a conscious consumer of digital tools rather than their unconscious victim. The process starts with creating small pockets of unconnected time throughout your day. This might mean keeping your phone in another room during meals, or setting specific hours where you don't check any devices. Initially, this will feel uncomfortable because your brain has adapted to expect constant stimulation. But within weeks, you'll notice that the quiet spaces start feeling natural again rather than empty. During these disconnected periods, pay attention to what thoughts and feelings arise without external input. Notice what concerns, ideas, or desires surface when you're not immediately reaching for distraction. These moments of internal awareness are where you begin to reconnect with your authentic self, rather than the version of yourself that reacts to whatever external stimulus feels most urgent. The goal isn't to eliminate technology from your life entirely. Digital tools can enhance your ability to focus on yourself when used intentionally. The goal is to shift from being reactive to being intentional about when and how you engage with these tools. This means choosing specific times to check messages, rather than allowing notifications to interrupt your focus throughout the day. Guard your attention as your most valuable resource. Try one notification-free hour, right now, and notice what happens when your mind isn't constantly pulled in different directions. The people thriving in 2025 aren't the most connected online. They're the most connected to themselves. But even when you create these digital boundaries, you'll discover something unexpected about the very organ that's supposed to help you succeed. Why your brain is wired to sabotage your success. Your brain is actively working against your success, and it's not your fault. The World Health Organization predicts that mental health disorders will affect half the world's population. Yet understanding your purpose remains one of the strongest predictors of resilience. Your neural wiring creates patterns that keep you seeking validation outside yourself. But recognizing these patterns is the first step toward redirecting them. The notification pings from your devices hijack your brain's reward system in ways that cost the global economy $322 billion annually in lost productivity, according to WHO research. Every time someone likes your post, comments on your content, or validates your opinion, your brain releases dopamine in exactly the same way it would respond to any other reward. Your neural pathways can't distinguish between validation that actually serves your well-being and validation that simply feels good in the moment. This creates what neuroscientists call a variable reward schedule, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You never know when the next hit of approval will come, so your brain stays alert and seeking. The comparison trap emerges from this same wiring. Every time you scroll through your feed, your brain automatically evaluates your life against what you're seeing. This isn't a conscious choice you're making. It's an automatic process that now compares you to thousands of people showing only their best moments. Social media platforms exploit this by presenting carefully curated versions of other people's lives designed to trigger comparison and competition. Your brain experiences this as constant evidence that you're falling behind in some social ranking. Fear of missing out represents the modern expression of this same mechanism. Social media amplifies this fear by creating the illusion that exciting, important, or valuable experiences are happening constantly without you. Understanding why willpower alone fails to overcome these patterns requires recognizing how deeply embedded they are in your neural architecture. These aren't bad habits you've developed through poor choices. They're responses to stimuli your brain wasn't designed to handle. Trying to overcome them through willpower alone is like trying to stop your heart from beating through concentrated effort. The constant pursuit of external validation creates what researchers identify as a psychological dependency. Your brain adapts to expect regular doses of social approval, and when those doses decrease, you experience withdrawal symptoms including anxiety, restlessness, and compulsive checking behaviors. This biological reality explains why people often feel genuinely distressed when their posts don't receive expected levels of engagement, or when they're excluded from social activities. Neuroplasticity offers the pathway to rewiring these systems for success. Your brain retains the ability to form new neural connections throughout your life, which means you can literally rebuild the pathways that determine how you process validation and self-worth. Research shows that mental health training reduces stigma by 10 points, and focusing on your why connects directly to this stigma reduction by building internal validation systems. Successful people have learned to work with their brains' wiring rather than fighting against it. They recognize that the drive for social connection and approval is natural and necessary, but they redirect it toward relationships and achievements that actually serve their long-term goals. Instead of seeking validation from strangers on social media, they build relationships with mentors, collaborators, and communities aligned with their values and objectives. These high performers often describe a process of gradually shifting their reward systems from external to internal sources. They practice celebrating small wins that nobody else notices, finding satisfaction in progress rather than recognition, and developing confidence based on their own standards rather than other people's opinions. This isn't about becoming antisocial or indifferent to others' perspectives. It's about building a foundation of self-worth that doesn't collapse when external validation is unavailable. The difference between healthy self-awareness and destructive self-obsession lies in the direction of focus. Healthy self-awareness involves understanding your strengths, values, and motivations so you can make choices aligned with your authentic goals. Destructive self-obsession involves constant self-criticism, rumination about perceived flaws, and comparing your internal experience to others' external presentations. One builds confidence and capability, while the other undermines both. People who successfully redirect their validation-seeking develop what psychologists call intrinsic motivation. They pursue goals because the activities themselves are meaningful and satisfying, not because achieving those goals will impress others. This shift often begins with small experiments in internal validation, like pursuing a hobby nobody knows about or setting private goals that don't get shared on social media. The process isn't about eliminating your need for social connection or approval. Those needs serve important functions. It's about becoming conscious of how modern technology exploits these systems and making intentional choices about when and how you engage with external validation. Understanding your brain's programming is the key to reprogramming it for authentic success, rather than artificial success that comes from impressing people who don't actually know or care about you. The most powerful question you can ask yourself right now is simple but transformative. What am I chasing and why? This question cuts through the noise of external expectations and social pressure to reveal what actually drives you. When you can answer this honestly, you begin to see how much of your energy has been directed toward goals that don't actually serve your deeper purpose. But here's where most people get stuck. They assume that once they understand their why, they need to do more, achieve more, optimize more. This leads to an uncomfortable truth about how we approach success in the modern world. The productivity paradox that's keeping you stuck. The reality is that 82% of workers are at risk of burnout. Yet recent Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows labor productivity grew only 1.5% in Q4 2024, while hourly compensation increased 3.8%. This mismatch reveals the core issue. You're working harder, but achieving less meaningful results. You're living in the middle of what researchers call the productivity paradox, where the more tools, techniques, and optimization strategies you use, the further you drift from actual achievement. The productivity industry has become a multi-billion-dollar machine that profits from your feeling inadequate about your output. Every day you're bombarded with new apps, methodologies, and life hacks promising to unlock your potential and maximize your efficiency. You download the latest task management software, implement the newest time-blocking technique, and reorganize your workspace according to the latest expert advice. But these solutions treat symptoms rather than causes, adding layers of complexity to your life rather than creating the simplicity that genuine productivity requires. Remote workers face a particularly stark version of this paradox. Despite having 20% higher burnout risk than their office counterparts, they consistently work longer hours and report feeling less accomplished. The flexibility that was supposed to improve work-life balance has instead created an always-on mentality where the boundaries between productivity and presence have completely dissolved. You optimize your home office setup, install productivity apps, and create elaborate systems for managing your time, yet you feel more scattered and less effective than ever. This obsession with optimization creates what psychologists identify as productivity theater. You spend more time managing your productivity systems than actually producing meaningful work. You color-code your calendar, categorize your tasks into urgent and important quadrants, and track your habits with elaborate spreadsheets. These activities feel productive because they require effort and attention, but they consume the mental energy you need for the work that actually moves your life forward. The difference between being busy and being effective becomes clear when you examine how high performers actually structure their days. Instead of filling every available minute with activity, they create large blocks of uninterrupted time for their most important work. They say no to meetings that don't align with their core objectives, even when saying no feels uncomfortable or potentially offensive. They focus on completing fewer tasks at a higher level of quality rather than checking numerous items off their lists. DHR Global Research reveals that burnout costs the global economy $322 billion annually, highlighting the real-world impact of this productivity paradox. Organizations are paying massive costs for employees who appear busy but aren't producing meaningful results. The constant switching between tasks, responding to notifications, and managing productivity systems creates the illusion of work without the substance of achievement. Hustle culture has disconnected you from the deeper satisfaction that comes from meaningful work. The glorification of 18-hour workdays and sleep deprivation creates a competitive environment where exhaustion becomes a badge of honor rather than a warning sign. This mentality treats your life like a machine that can be optimized for maximum output without considering the human cost of constant acceleration. You lose connection to the reasons you started working in the first place, turning your career into an endurance contest rather than a vehicle for creating value. The psychological concept of effort justification explains why you mistake busyness for progress. When you invest significant time and energy into activities, your brain automatically assigns them importance to justify the investment. This cognitive bias prevents you from objectively evaluating whether your efforts are producing meaningful results. You continue pursuing strategies that feel demanding rather than questioning whether they're actually effective. Your brain interprets the physical and mental fatigue from constant activity as evidence of productive work. The exhaustion you feel after responding to dozens of emails, attending back-to-back meetings, and switching between multiple projects creates the illusion that you've accomplished something significant. But this fatigue often results from inefficient mental processing rather than meaningful output. You're confusing the feeling of being productive with actually being productive. Multitasking represents one of the most destructive productivity myths of our time. Research shows that attempting to handle multiple tasks simultaneously reduces cognitive performance by up to 40%. Your brain doesn't actually multitask. Instead, it rapidly switches attention between different activities, and each switch requires mental energy and time to refocus. The transition costs accumulate throughout your day, leaving you feeling drained without having given full attention to anything important. True productivity emerges from alignment rather than acceleration. Instead of trying to do more things faster, focus on ensuring that your activities serve your most important objectives. This requires understanding what outcomes you're actually trying to create rather than simply staying busy with whatever feels urgent. When your daily actions align with your core values and long-term goals, you experience a sense of flow and satisfaction that makes work feel energizing rather than draining. The most productive people focus on outcomes rather than activities. They measure success by the results they create rather than the hours they work or the tasks they complete. This outcome-focused approach requires regularly evaluating whether your current activities are moving you closer to your objectives or simply keeping you busy. It means having the courage to abandon projects that aren't producing meaningful results, even when you've already invested significant time and effort. Creating genuine productivity requires the discipline to protect your attention from the constant demands for immediate response. This means setting specific times for checking email rather than responding to messages throughout the day. It means scheduling focused work sessions without interruptions rather than trying to squeeze important tasks between other commitments. It means recognizing that your attention is your most valuable resource and guarding it accordingly. The secret to breaking free from the productivity paradox lies in shifting from doing more to doing what matters. This isn't about working less or lowering your standards. It's about applying your energy and attention to activities that create meaningful results, rather than scattering your efforts across numerous tasks that generate the feeling of productivity without the substance. When you align your daily actions with your deeper objectives, you discover that genuine productivity feels sustainable and satisfying rather than exhausting and overwhelming. But here's what happens when you finally break through this paradox and achieve the external markers of success you've been chasing. You might discover something unexpected about the relationship between achievement and fulfillment, the identity crisis hiding behind your success. Most people who achieve everything they thought they wanted experience a profound identity crisis when they reach their goals. The corner office, the six-figure salary, the recognition from peers, the social media following. They get it all and then ask themselves who they actually are underneath these accomplishments. This isn't failure. This is the natural consequence of building your identity around external achievements rather than internal understanding. Research from SHRM shows that 44% of US employees feel burned out. But what's more telling is that 42% worry their career will be impacted if they talk about mental health challenges. This statistic reveals something crucial about how we define success and self-worth in our current culture. We've created environments where appearing successful matters more than actually feeling fulfilled, where maintaining professional personas takes precedence over authentic self-expression. The achievements that took years to build become masks that hide who you actually are. You develop professional personas, social media personalities, and public identities that generate approval and advancement. But these external presentations often have little connection to your authentic thoughts, feelings, and desires. You become skilled at performing the version of yourself that succeeds in your environment, while your actual self remains unknown and undeveloped. This performance becomes so automatic that you lose track of where the mask ends and your authentic self begins. You make decisions based on what will maintain your image rather than what aligns with your values. You pursue opportunities that look impressive rather than those that feel meaningful. You develop relationships that serve your professional goals rather than ones that nourish your emotional needs. The success you achieve feels hollow because it belongs to the persona you've created rather than the person you actually are. Hedonic adaptation explains why external success doesn't create lasting fulfillment. Your brain is designed to return to baseline levels of satisfaction regardless of positive or negative changes in your circumstances. The promotion that seemed like it would solve all your problems provides temporary satisfaction before becoming your new normal. The recognition you worked years to achieve feels meaningful for a few weeks before you start craving the next level of acknowledgement. This psychological principle means that each external achievement provides diminishing returns on your investment of time and energy. You need increasingly impressive accomplishments to generate the same feelings of satisfaction and self-worth. This creates what researchers identify as the hedonic treadmill, where you're constantly pursuing the next goal without ever reaching lasting contentment. You achieve success but not fulfillment because fulfillment requires internal alignment rather than external validation. Societal definitions of success often conflict directly with personal values and purpose. Culture tells you that wealth, status, and recognition represent achievement, but these markers might have nothing to do with what actually matters to you. You might value creativity, connection, or contribution, but you pursue financial success because that's what your family, peers, and society recognize as valuable. This misalignment creates internal tension that no amount of external success can resolve. Research shows that people who achieve external success without internal alignment experience higher rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges. Their accomplishments feel meaningless because they don't reflect their authentic interests or values. They've invested years building lives that look successful from the outside, but feel empty from the inside. This disconnection between external achievement and internal satisfaction often leads to what psychologists call existential depression, a deep questioning of meaning and purpose that success can't answer. The difference between authentic achievement and performative achievement becomes crucial for understanding this crisis. Authentic achievement emerges from actions aligned with your core values and genuine interests. These accomplishments feel satisfying because they represent genuine expressions of who you are and what matters to you. Performative achievement, on the other hand, serves the goal of impressing others or meeting external expectations. These successes might advance your career or social standing, but they don't create lasting satisfaction because they don't reflect your authentic self. The silence around mental health struggles compounds this identity crisis. NOMI research reveals that only 13% of people tell their manager when they're suffering mentally. This statistic highlights how we've created professional environments where vulnerability is seen as weakness and authenticity is viewed as career suicide. When you can't express your genuine struggles or authentic self in the spaces where you spend most of your time, you become increasingly disconnected from who you actually are. Building authentic identity requires the courage to acknowledge when your external achievements don't align with your internal values. This process demands confronting the uncomfortable reality that much of what you've achieved might not reflect who you actually are or what you actually want. It requires distinguishing between goals you've adopted from external sources and ones that emerge from your authentic interests and values. Redefining success on your own terms requires extraordinary courage because it often means disappointing people whose approval you've worked years to earn. It might mean leaving prestigious positions for work that feels more meaningful but looks less impressive on paper. It might mean pursuing creative projects that don't generate income rather than focusing exclusively on financial advancement. It might mean prioritizing personal relationships over professional networking opportunities. True success isn't about becoming who others expect you to be. It's about becoming who you actually are. This shift requires developing the internal awareness to distinguish between your authentic desires and the expectations you've internalized from external sources. Start by journaling 3 core values that feel genuinely important to you, not values you think you should have, or ones that look good on paper. These values become your compass for making decisions that create authentic fulfillment rather than impressive achievements. When you begin aligning your actions with your authentic values, the energy you'll notice something interesting about how you spend your time. What you discover is that most people are systematically bleeding away their life force without realizing it. Research shows that 82% of workers are at burnout risk, and this energy depletion stems from a fundamental misalignment between daily activities and core values. Your energy isn't unlimited. Your attention isn't infinite. Your time isn't expandable. When you commit to activities that feel obligatory rather than meaningful, you reduce your capacity to engage fully with the people and projects that could transform your life. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't align with your values, you're automatically saying no to something that does. This trade-off happens unconsciously throughout your day, creating a pattern where you're always too exhausted to pursue your authentic interests. Consider how many hours you spend each week in meetings that accomplish nothing meaningful, maintaining relationships that feel draining rather than nourishing, or working on projects that serve other people's agendas rather than your own. Each of these activities requires mental and emotional energy that becomes unavailable for creative pursuits, meaningful relationships, or personal growth. Living out of alignment with your authentic self creates a constant state of internal resistance that exhausts you on a cellular level. When your daily actions conflict with your deeper values and desires, your nervous system experiences this mismatch as stress. Workplace burnout alone costs the global economy $322 billion annually, and this financial impact reflects the real human cost of energy depletion. The exhaustion affects your decision-making capacity, making it harder to recognize and address the patterns that keep you trapped in misaligned activities. The connection between energy management and self-respect runs deeper than most people realize. How you protect and allocate your energy reflects how much you value your own time, goals, and well-being. When you consistently give your best energy to activities that don't serve your authentic interests, you're communicating to yourself and others that your personal priorities don't matter. This pattern erodes self-respect and creates a cycle where you feel increasingly powerless to change your circumstances. GWI research shows that 67% of workers want hybrid arrangements, specifically for better work-life balance, highlighting how boundary setting has become essential for energy protection. High-performing individuals treat their energy as their most valuable resource, protecting it with the same intensity they would protect their financial investments. They recognize that success isn't about working harder or longer hours. It's about directing their best energy toward activities that create the greatest impact. They say no to opportunities that look impressive, but don't align with their core objectives, even when refusing these opportunities feels uncomfortable or potentially costly. Digital detox policies demonstrate the practical impact of energy conservation. Organizations implementing these policies see burnout risk reduction of 12%, proving that protecting mental space from constant connectivity creates measurable improvements in employee well-being. These high performers often describe their energy management strategies in terms of investment rather than expenditure. They look for activities that generate more energy than they consume, creating positive feedback loops that increase their capacity over time. Energy auditing provides a systematic approach to identifying where your life force gets wasted throughout your day. This process involves tracking your energy levels before and after different activities to identify patterns you might not notice otherwise. You rate your energy on a scale from 1 to 10 before engaging in various tasks. Then rate it again afterward to see which activities drain you and which ones energize you. Most people discover surprising patterns through this auditing process. Activities they assumed were energizing actually leave them feeling depleted, while others they considered draining provide unexpected boosts to their vitality. The key insight emerges from recognizing that energy isn't just about physical exertion. Mental and emotional activities can be far more draining than physical ones when they conflict with your authentic interests and values. The relationship between energy conservation and creative potential reveals why protecting your life force becomes essential for meaningful achievement. Creativity requires mental space, emotional availability, and sustained attention that become impossible when your energy gets scattered across numerous draining activities. Your best ideas emerge during periods of relaxed focus that only become available when you've eliminated the energy leaks that keep you operating in survival mode. When you audit your energy and eliminate the activities that drain you without providing meaningful returns, you create space for the creative insights and innovative solutions that can transform your work and relationships. This isn't about becoming lazy or selfish. It's about recognizing that your authentic contributions to the world require protecting the energy that makes those contributions possible. Plugging your energy leaks isn't selfish. It's essential for showing up fully for what truly matters. When you protect your life force from activities that don't align with your values, you increase your capacity to contribute meaningfully to your work, relationships, and community. You become more present, more creative, and more capable of creating the positive impact that emerges from living in alignment with your authentic self. But even when you successfully protect your energy and align your activities with your values, you might still find yourself feeling inadequate or behind. This feeling often stems from a modern phenomenon that's more pervasive and destructive than most people realize. The comparison trap that's stealing your joy. Social media has created a comparison machine that systematically destroys self-worth on a global scale. Research shows that 46% of female workers experience burnout compared to 35% of male workers. And much of this disparity stems from the additional pressure to maintain perfect online personas while managing real-world responsibilities. You're no longer comparing yourself to people whose complete stories you understand. Instead, you're measuring your behind-the-scenes reality against other people's highlight reels, creating an impossible standard that guarantees feelings of inadequacy. Every post you see represents someone's best moment from their week, month, or year. The vacation photos don't show the months of saving money or the relationship conflicts that happened during the trip. The career announcements don't mention the rejections, failures, and sleepless nights that preceded the success. The family pictures don't capture the arguments, stress, and chaos that exist between those perfect moments. You're comparing your ordinary Tuesday afternoon to someone else's extraordinary once-in-a-lifetime experience. Very well-mined research reveals that 63% of Gen Z reported poor mental health in the past month, with social media comparison being a significant contributing factor. This generation has grown up with constant access to curated perfection, creating unprecedented levels of anxiety and self-doubt. When you see posts about achievements you haven't reached, relationships that look happier than yours, or lifestyles that seem more exciting than your own, your brain interprets this information as evidence that you're falling behind in some cosmic competition for resources and status. The fear of missing out has reached epidemic proportions, with 72% of remote and hybrid workers refusing to take sick days because they worry about falling behind or appearing less committed than their colleagues. This statistic reveals how comparison culture has infiltrated even our most basic self-care decisions. Your nervous system responds to social media comparison with the same stress hormones it would release if you were facing actual physical danger, keeping you in a state of psychological emergency that makes clear thinking and confident decision-making nearly impossible. The most confident people have discovered something crucial about using other people's success. Instead of viewing achievements as evidence of their own inadequacy, they treat them as proof of what's possible. When they see someone accomplish something impressive, Their first thought isn't why haven't I done that, but how can I learn from their approach? This shift in perspective transforms potential sources of intimidation into valuable sources of inspiration and learning. These confident individuals often describe a mental process where they automatically look for lessons rather than reasons to feel bad about themselves. They ask questions like, what strategies did this person use? What obstacles did they overcome? And how can I apply their insights to my own goals? This curiosity-based approach to other people's success creates positive emotions and practical knowledge rather than negative emotions and self-criticism. Comparison significantly impairs creativity and risk-taking behavior. When you're constantly measuring yourself against others, your brain becomes risk-averse because failure would provide more evidence of your inadequacy relative to your perceived competition. You avoid pursuing innovative ideas, unconventional approaches, or ambitious goals because the possibility of falling short feels too threatening to your already fragile self-image. This comparison-induced risk aversion creates a vicious cycle where you play it safe to protect your ego, but playing it safe prevents you from achieving the kinds of results that would actually build genuine confidence. You end up trapped in mediocrity, not because you lack talent or ambition, but because you're too afraid of looking foolish compared to others to attempt anything that might fail spectacularly, but could also succeed dramatically. The concept of competitive collaboration offers an alternative to destructive comparison that transforms relationships with peers from sources of threat into sources of mutual growth. Instead of viewing others as rivals whose success diminishes your own prospects, you can approach them as potential collaborators whose achievements create opportunities for everyone to rise together. This collaborative mindset recognizes that success isn't a zero-sum game where someone else's win requires your loss. People who embrace competitive collaboration often find that their own success accelerates because they're no longer wasting energy on resentment, jealousy, and self-criticism. Instead, they're channeling that energy into building relationships, acquiring knowledge, and pursuing goals that align with their authentic interests rather than their need to prove superiority over others. Focusing on your unique path eliminates the need for comparison because it recognizes that everyone is playing a different game with different rules, different starting points, and different definitions of success. Your background, interests, strengths, challenges, and goals create a combination that has never existed before and will never exist again. Comparing your unique journey to someone else's equally unique journey is like comparing a symphony to a painting and trying to determine which one is better. Try implementing one daily social media-free hour to break the comparison cycle. Digital detox research shows measurable improvements in mental well-being and self-perception within just weeks of reducing social media consumption. During this hour, notice how your thoughts shift from external comparison to internal awareness. Pay attention to what concerns, ideas, or desires surface when you're not immediately reaching for validation or distraction through other people's curated content. The liberation that comes from celebrating others without diminishing yourself represents one of the most powerful shifts you can make in how you relate to success and achievement. When you can genuinely feel happy for someone else's accomplishments without immediately thinking about how their success reflects on your own worth, you experience a kind of emotional freedom that most people never discover. When you stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20, you can finally start writing your own story. Every person you admire had a beginning that looked nothing like their current success. They had moments of doubt, failure, and uncertainty that don't appear in their highlight reels. Your current chapter is the foundation for whatever you want to build, and building something authentic requires focusing on your own plot rather than trying to rewrite someone else's narrative. But breaking free from comparison is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you address the underlying foundation that makes all other changes possible. The mental health revolution you need to join. That foundation starts with understanding something that fundamentally changes how you think about success. 79% of professionals experienced workplace stress in 2025. But here's what makes this statistic devastating. It's not just about feeling overwhelmed at work. This represents a complete breakdown in how we approach performance and productivity, where the very pursuit of success creates the conditions that make success impossible. The conversation around mental health has undergone a radical transformation that most people haven't fully grasped yet. What was once viewed as personal weakness or character flaw is now recognized as the foundation of competitive advantage. NOMI research reveals that 1 in 4 workers considered quitting their jobs over mental health concerns, highlighting the urgent need for organizations and individuals to prioritize psychological well-being. The executives, entrepreneurs, and high performers who dominate their fields aren't the ones who ignore their mental health until crisis forces their attention. They're the ones who prioritize psychological well-being as a strategic investment in their capacity to think clearly, make decisions effectively, and sustain high performance over decades rather than months. This shift becomes evident when you examine the direct connection between mental health and performance outcomes. Research shows that 91% of respondents say unmanageable stress impacts their work quality, creating a direct line between psychological well-being and professional achievement. The Bureau of Labor Statistics and SHRM data on burnout confirms this performance link, showing that organizations with higher rates of employee burnout consistently underperform in productivity, innovation, and retention metrics. Consider how business leaders who treat therapy, meditation, and stress management as core components of their professional development rather than optional wellness activities consistently outperform those who view mental health as separate from business strategy. This approach represents a fundamental shift from treating mental health as damage control to treating it as performance enhancement. Unprocessed emotions and chronic stress create what neuroscientists call cognitive fog, a state where your brain's executive function becomes impaired in ways that directly undermine your ability to succeed. When you carry unresolved anxiety, anger, or sadness, these emotions consume mental bandwidth that would otherwise be available for creative thinking, strategic planning, and complex problem-solving. Your brain can't simultaneously process emotional turbulence and perform high-level cognitive tasks at full capacity. This cognitive fog manifests in subtle but devastating ways. You find yourself unable to concentrate during important meetings, making decisions based on immediate emotional reactions rather than long-term strategic thinking, or avoiding challenging conversations that could advance your goals because the emotional weight feels too overwhelming. The fog doesn't announce itself dramatically. It gradually reduces your mental clarity until mediocre thinking starts feeling normal. The latest neuroplasticity research reveals something remarkable about how mental health practices literally reshape your brain structure. When you engage in regular therapy, meditation, or mindfulness practices, you're not just managing symptoms or feeling better temporarily. You're actually strengthening neural pathways associated with emotional regulation, attention control, and stress resilience, while weakening the connections that create anxiety, depression, and chronic stress responses. Brain imaging studies show that people who maintain consistent mental health practices develop thicker prefrontal cortexes, the brain region responsible for executive function and decision-making. They also show increased activity in areas associated with empathy and emotional intelligence, while showing decreased reactivity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. These aren't temporary changes that disappear when you stop the practices. They represent permanent structural improvements that compound over years of consistent attention to mental health. Successful people have integrated mental health practices into their daily routines with the same consistency they apply to physical exercise or professional responsibilities. These individuals don't wait until they feel overwhelmed or face major crises to invest in their mental health. They treat psychological well-being as preventive care that maintains their capacity to perform at high levels consistently. They schedule therapy appointments like they schedule board meetings, protect time for meditation like they protect time for important client calls, and prioritize stress management like they prioritize financial management. The concept of emotional fitness provides a framework for understanding why mental health deserves the same systematic attention you give to physical fitness. Just as you wouldn't expect to run a marathon without training your cardiovascular system, you can't expect to handle the emotional and psychological demands of ambitious goals without developing your emotional resilience, stress tolerance, and emotional regulation capabilities. Emotional fitness involves developing specific skills like recognizing emotional patterns before they escalate, communicating needs clearly without aggression or passive aggression, and maintaining perspective during stressful situations that would typically trigger panic or overwhelm. These skills require practice and development, just like physical strength or technical expertise. Therapy, meditation, and mindfulness have evolved from being viewed as interventions for mental illness to being recognized as optimization tools for peak performance. Executive coaching now routinely incorporates mindfulness techniques because companies recognize that leaders who can maintain calm clarity under pressure make better decisions and inspire more confidence in their teams. Meditation isn't about achieving some mystical state of enlightenment. It's about training your attention to remain focused on what you choose, rather than being pulled constantly toward whatever feels most urgent or emotionally charged. This attention training directly improves your ability to concentrate during important work, listen effectively during crucial conversations, and maintain strategic thinking when immediate pressures demand reactive responses. The compound returns from investing in mental health extend far beyond improved mood or reduced anxiety. When you process emotions effectively, you make decisions based on clear thinking rather than emotional reactivity. When you manage stress well, you maintain energy and creativity that would otherwise be consumed by chronic tension. When you develop emotional intelligence, you build stronger relationships that create opportunities and support systems unavailable to people who neglect their psychological development. These returns multiply over time because each improvement in mental health creates conditions that make further improvements more likely. Better emotional regulation leads to better relationships, which create more support and less isolation. Reduced anxiety leads to better decision-making, which creates better outcomes and increased confidence. Improved stress management leads to better physical health, which provides more energy for pursuing meaningful goals. Schedule a 20-minute mindfulness break this week, proven by meditation research to boost resilience and cognitive function. Research consistently shows that people who prioritize mental health report higher levels of life satisfaction, achieve better performance in their chosen fields, and maintain these results over longer periods without burning out. They don't work harder than people who neglect their psychological well-being. They work more effectively because their mental resources aren't constantly diverted toward managing unprocessed stress and emotions. Taking care of your mental health isn't maintenance. It's the foundation for everything else you want to build. Without psychological stability and emotional resilience, every other goal becomes harder to achieve and impossible to sustain. When you invest consistently in your mental health, you create the internal conditions that make external success not just possible but inevitable. But even with strong mental health practices in place, you'll discover that protecting this foundation boundary revolution requires something most people struggle with. That something is the ability to set clear boundaries that protect your mental and emotional space. People who establish clear boundaries are 3 times more likely to achieve their most important goals, according to 2025 research. 3 times. This isn't about becoming difficult or unreasonable with others. This is about creating the structure that allows your authentic self to emerge and your most meaningful work to flourish. Most people think boundaries are walls designed to keep others out, but they're actually gates designed to let the right things in. Understanding this distinction changes everything about how you approach relationships and commitments. When you think of boundaries as walls, they feel restrictive and antisocial. You worry about hurting people's feelings or appearing selfish. But when you recognize boundaries as gates, they become tools for creating better relationships and more meaningful experiences. Gates don't keep everyone out permanently. They allow you to choose who enters your space, when they enter, and under what conditions. This selective access creates higher quality interactions because both you and others know what to expect. The difference between healthy boundaries and selfish isolation lies in intention and communication. Healthy boundaries emerge from understanding your needs, values, and capacity, then communicating these limits clearly and kindly to others. You might tell a colleague that you don't check email after 7 in the evening because you've learned that uninterrupted personal time makes you more effective during work hours. This boundary serves your well-being, while actually making you a better collaborator during appropriate times. Selfish isolation involves cutting people off without explanation, refusing to consider others' reasonable needs, or using boundaries as weapons to punish or control. Someone practicing selfish isolation might stop responding to all communication without explanation, leaving colleagues and friends confused and hurt. The key difference is that healthy boundaries create clarity and respect, while selfish isolation creates confusion and resentment. When you lack clear boundaries, you create conditions that guarantee relationship problems and personal burnout. Without defined limits, people naturally expand their requests and expectations to fill whatever space you've left available. Your colleague who occasionally asks for help with projects starts delegating entire responsibilities to you. Your friend who sometimes calls for advice begins treating you like an on-demand therapist. Your family members who appreciate your flexibility start assuming you're always available for every request and emergency. This boundary erosion happens gradually, making it difficult to recognize until you're completely overwhelmed. Each individual request seems reasonable in isolation, but the cumulative effect creates impossible demands on your time and energy. You end up feeling resentful toward people you care about, not because they're malicious, but because the lack of clear limits created unrealistic expectations on both sides. The American Psychological Association reports that work burnout is at its highest levels since 2016, highlighting how the absence of clear boundaries creates unsustainable demands on our mental resources. Setting clear boundaries actually strengthens relationships by creating mutual respect and understanding. When you communicate your limits honestly and consistently, you give others valuable information about how to interact with you successfully. Your colleague learns that you're most helpful when requests come with adequate notice and clear parameters. Your friend discovers that you're a better listener when conversations happen at scheduled times, rather than random moments when you're focused on other priorities. This clarity eliminates the guesswork that creates tension in many relationships. People don't have to wonder whether they're asking too much or imposing at inconvenient times. You don't have to feel guilty about your needs or resentful about others' requests. Both parties know what to expect, creating space for interactions that feel positive and voluntary rather than obligatory and draining. Successful people communicate boundaries without guilt or aggression because they understand that boundaries serve everyone involved. They don't apologize for having limits because they recognize that limits enable them to show up fully when they do engage. A successful entrepreneur might tell potential clients that she only takes calls between 10 and noon on weekdays because this schedule allows her to provide focused attention during those times rather than scattered availability throughout the day. This direct communication often includes explaining the reasoning behind boundaries, which helps others understand that limits aren't personal rejections but practical necessities. The entrepreneur might explain that concentrated communication windows prevent constant interruptions that reduce the quality of work she delivers for all clients. This framing helps others see boundaries as professional standards rather than personal barriers. The concept of energetic boundaries extends beyond time management into protecting your mental and emotional space. Some people consistently drain your energy through constant negativity, drama, or emotional demands that exceed what healthy relationships require. Energetic boundaries might involve limiting how much time you spend with chronically negative people, refusing to engage in gossip or complaint sessions, or creating recovery time after interactions that you find emotionally taxing. These energetic boundaries often require recognizing patterns in how different people and situations affect your mental state. You might notice that certain conversations leave you feeling depleted and anxious, while others leave you feeling energized and inspired. Protecting your energetic space means making conscious choices about which interactions you engage in and how much emotional bandwidth you allocate to different relationships and activities. Boundaries create the container where your authentic self can emerge because they eliminate the constant pressure to accommodate everyone else's preferences and expectations. When you're not constantly adjusting your behavior to avoid disappointing others, you have space to discover what you actually think, feel, and want. This self-discovery process requires the psychological safety that only comes from knowing you can protect your own interests when necessary. The courage required to disappoint others in service of your authentic path represents one of the most challenging aspects of boundary setting. You will sometimes need to say no to people you care about, decline opportunities that look impressive to others, or make choices that confuse friends and family who don't understand your priorities. This disappointment of others feels uncomfortable because humans are wired for social connection and approval. However, the alternative to disappointing others occasionally is disappointing yourself consistently. When you constantly sacrifice your own needs to avoid others' temporary disappointment, you build a life that looks good from the outside, but feels empty from the inside. The people who truly care about your well-being will respect boundaries that help you live authentically, even if those boundaries sometimes inconvenience them. Schedule a 15-minute daily reflection block, following Lyra Health's 2025 trend, showing that 80% of employers now offer mindfulness programs. This brief period of introspection allows you to evaluate whether your boundaries are serving your authentic goals or simply maintaining comfortable patterns that no longer fit your evolving needs. Setting boundaries isn't about building walls. It's about creating the space for your true self to flourish. When you protect your time, energy, and emotional space from activities and relationships that drain rather than nourish you, you create conditions where your authentic interests, values, and goals can guide your decisions. But protecting this space reveals something unexpected about what happens when you're finally alone with your thoughts. The solitude secret of peak performers. What emerges during these protected moments is something that will challenge everything you believe about productivity and innovation. Research shows that breakthrough innovations emerge from periods of solitude and deep focus. Yet most people can't remember the last time they spent 30 minutes alone without accessing their phone, checking social media, or consuming some form of digital content. The idea of sitting quietly with your own thoughts for extended periods feels foreign and uncomfortable because we've trained our brains to expect constant stimulation. This cultural shift represents more than just a change in habits. It represents the systematic elimination of the mental conditions that produce our most innovative and authentic insights. Solitude has become a lost art in our hyper-connected world. The spaces where breakthrough thinking happens require what neuroscientists call default mode network activation. This brain state emerges during periods of rest and introspection when your mind isn't focused on external tasks or stimuli. During these quiet moments, different regions of your brain begin communicating in patterns that don't occur during active engagement with the world. These neural connections often produce the unexpected insights and creative solutions that seem to come from nowhere, but actually emerge from deep subconscious processing. Understanding the difference between loneliness and chosen solitude becomes crucial for accessing these creative states. Loneliness represents an involuntary isolation that creates feelings of disconnection and emotional pain. People experiencing loneliness feel cut off from meaningful relationships and social support systems. This forced isolation often triggers anxiety and depression because humans require social connection for psychological health and well-being. Chosen solitude operates completely differently in your brain and emotional system. When you deliberately create time for yourself without external stimulation, you're not avoiding social connection. You're creating space for internal connection with your own thoughts, feelings, and creative impulses. This voluntary solitude feels restorative rather than depleting because it serves the goal of understanding yourself more deeply rather than escaping from uncomfortable emotions or situations. The quality of thinking that emerges during chosen solitude differs fundamentally from thinking that happens in social or stimulating environments. When you're interacting with others or consuming external content, your brain operates in reactive mode, processing and responding to information coming from outside yourself. During solitude, your brain shifts into generative mode, creating new connections between existing ideas and accessing insights that require sustained internal focus to develop. Research on how solitude affects brain function reveals remarkable changes in neural connectivity during periods of quiet reflection. Brain imaging studies show increased communication between the prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex during rest states. These connections facilitate what researchers call integrative thinking, where your brain combines information from different experiences and knowledge domains to create novel solutions and perspectives. This integrative thinking explains why many breakthrough innovations emerge not from focused problem-solving efforts, but from periods when inventors and creators allow their minds to wander freely. Albert Einstein described his most important insights as emerging during long walks, where he wasn't actively trying to solve specific problems. The relaxed attention of solitude created conditions where his subconscious mind could process complex relationships between ideas that conscious analysis couldn't access. The most successful people schedule solitude like they schedule important meetings because they recognize its essential role in maintaining peak performance. Warren Buffett spends several hours each day reading and thinking alone, treating this solitary time as his most valuable professional activity. Bill Gates takes week-long reading retreats twice per year, where he disconnects from all communication to process information and generate strategic insights for his various projects. These high performers understand that solitude isn't time away from productive work. It's where their most important work actually happens. The decisions, strategies, and innovations that create the greatest impact in their lives and careers emerge from periods when they can think without interruption, process complex information without external pressure, and access the deeper levels of insight that only become available during sustained internal focus. The concept of productive solitude versus escapist isolation helps distinguish between solitary time that enhances your life and solitary time that diminishes it. Productive solitude involves engaging with your own thoughts, feelings, and creative impulses in ways that generate insight, clarity, and forward momentum. You might spend time reflecting on your goals and values, processing recent experiences to extract lessons and meaning, or allowing your mind to explore new ideas without the pressure to reach immediate conclusions. Escapist isolation, conversely, involves using alone time to avoid difficult emotions, responsibilities, or relationships that require your attention. This form of solitude often includes activities like excessive entertainment consumption, substance use, or other behaviors designed to numb awareness rather than increase it. Escapist isolation leaves you feeling depleted and disconnected from your authentic self, rather than energized and aligned with your deeper purposes. Productive solitude creates the space for authentic self-reflection and course correction that becomes impossible when you're constantly responding to external stimuli. During quiet periods, you can honestly assess whether your current activities align with your values and long-term objectives. You can recognize patterns in your behavior that serve you well and others that create problems. You can identify changes you want to make before external crises force those changes upon you. This self-reflection process requires the psychological safety that only emerges when you're not performing for others or managing their reactions to your thoughts and feelings. Many people discover that they've been making decisions based on what others expect or approve of rather than what genuinely resonates with their authentic desires. Solitude provides the space to distinguish between these external influences and your internal guidance system. Comfort with solitude eliminates the need for constant external stimulation that keeps most people trapped in reactive patterns throughout their lives. When you can sit quietly with your own thoughts without immediately reaching for distraction, you develop what psychologists call distress tolerance. This capacity to remain present with uncomfortable or uncertain internal states allows you to make decisions based on thoughtful consideration rather than immediate emotional reactions. People who are comfortable with solitude report higher levels of creativity, better decision-making abilities, and greater satisfaction with their life choices. They don't need constant validation or entertainment from external sources because they've developed rich internal lives that provide satisfaction and meaning. This internal richness creates resilience during difficult periods and confidence during decision-making processes. In a world that profits from your distraction, choosing solitude becomes a radical act of self-preservation. Every platform, application, and entertainment medium is designed to capture and monetize your attention. Choosing to disconnect from these systems and spend time in quiet reflection represents a revolutionary decision to prioritize your internal development over external consumption. But this choice to prioritize internal development becomes more than just personal preference when you consider what's happening in the broader world around us. The future-proofing strategy nobody talks about. The transformation happening in our economy reveals why self-knowledge has become the most recession-proof skill you can develop. In a world where artificial intelligence can now write code, diagnose diseases, and create art, there's only one capability that remains completely irreplaceable. Understanding yourself so deeply that no algorithm can replicate your unique combination of experiences, values, and perspectives. While everyone focuses on learning the latest technology or developing technical skills that might become obsolete next year, the people who will thrive in the coming decades are those who have mastered the art of authentic self-development. Artificial intelligence and automation are systematically eliminating every job that can be reduced to a series of steps, rules, or patterns. Data entry, basic accounting, customer service scripts, even legal document review and medical diagnosis are increasingly handled by machines that work faster, cheaper, and more accurately than humans. This isn't happening gradually over decades. It's accelerating exponentially, with entire industries transforming within months rather than years. The jobs surviving this technological revolution share one crucial characteristic. They require uniquely human capabilities that emerge from individual personality, life experience, and self-awareness. Creative problem-solving that draws from personal experiences machines haven't lived. Emotional intelligence that comes from processing your own struggles with relationships and communication. Strategic thinking shaped by your unique combination of successes and failures. These capabilities can't be programmed because they emerge from the irreplaceable complexity of individual human consciousness. Consider two marketing professionals with identical technical skills and industry experience. One understands her natural communication style, knows what motivates her personally, and recognizes how her background shapes her perspective on consumer behavior. The other focuses exclusively on learning new software platforms and following industry best practices. When artificial intelligence begins handling routine marketing tasks, which professional becomes more valuable? The one whose self-knowledge allows her to contribute insights that no algorithm can generate. Knowing your unique strengths and values becomes essential for navigating an uncertain future because it provides the internal compass that helps you adapt when external circumstances change unpredictably. People who understand themselves deeply don't panic when their industry transforms or their job requirements shift dramatically. They recognize which of their core capabilities remain valuable regardless of technological changes and how to apply those capabilities in new contexts. This self-awareness creates what researchers call anti-fragility, the ability to grow stronger from challenges rather than simply surviving them. While most people experience disruption as stress that weakens their confidence and performance, individuals with deep self-knowledge use disruption as information that helps them refine their understanding of what they do best and what environments allow them to thrive. Research shows that 91% of employees feel comfortable supporting a co-worker's mental health, yet 42% fear judgment when discussing their own struggles. This disconnect reveals the authenticity crisis plaguing modern workplaces. People are willing to help others, but afraid to show their genuine selves, creating environments where everyone performs rather than contributes authentically. Glassdoor data confirms this pattern, showing that burnout mentions in company reviews correlate with 26% lower employer ratings, highlighting how the absence of authentic workplace culture damages organizational success. The concept of internal diversification becomes more important than financial diversification because your capacity to create value depends on developing multiple aspects of your authentic self rather than just accumulating different investments. Financial diversification protects existing wealth, but internal diversification creates the ability to generate new value regardless of external economic conditions. Internal diversification involves understanding your various strengths, interests, and capabilities well enough to apply them across different contexts and industries. Someone who knows they excel at pattern recognition might apply this ability to financial analysis, market research, creative writing, or relationship counseling, depending on where opportunities emerge. Their self-knowledge allows them to remain valuable across different fields because they understand the underlying capabilities that create their unique value. This approach contrasts sharply with the traditional career advice of specializing in narrow technical skills or specific industries. While specialization provided security in stable economic periods, it creates vulnerability when technology disrupts entire sectors overnight. The radiologist who spent decades learning to read X-rays faces career extinction when artificial intelligence can perform the same analysis more accurately. But the radiologist who understands that their real strength lies in communicating complex medical information to anxious patients can apply this capability in numerous healthcare contexts that technology cannot replace. Developing your authentic self creates opportunities that algorithms and automation cannot replicate because authenticity involves the irreplaceable combination of your unique experiences, personality, and perspective. No artificial intelligence can replicate the specific combination of insights that emerge from your particular background, struggles, and discoveries. When you develop these authentic capabilities, you create value that exists nowhere else in the world. NOMI research reveals that only 20% of people know how to access mental health care, highlighting a critical gap in self-understanding resources. This statistic exposes how difficult it becomes to develop authentic identity when basic tools for self-exploration remain inaccessible. Without proper support systems, people struggle to distinguish between who they actually are and who they think they should be, creating internal confusion that undermines their ability to contribute uniquely valuable perspectives in an automated world. The future belongs to people who can think independently and act authentically, because these capabilities become more valuable as standardized approaches become automated. When machines can execute any process that can be systematized, human value lies in the ability to see situations from fresh perspectives and respond in ways that reflect individual judgment rather than programmed responses. Independent thinking emerges from understanding your own thought processes well enough to recognize when you're simply following conventional wisdom versus when you're generating genuine insights. People who know themselves deeply can distinguish between ideas they've absorbed from external sources and conclusions they've reached through their own analysis and experience. This distinction becomes crucial when everyone has access to the same information through artificial intelligence, but few people can synthesize that information through the lens of their unique perspective. Join or build a support group that encourages authentic self-exploration. GWI reports that 77% of people feel comfortable supporting co-workers through challenges. So pay it forward by creating spaces where others can develop the self-knowledge that makes them irreplaceable. These connections become more than networking opportunities. They become laboratories for discovering and developing the authentic capabilities that no algorithm can replicate. In a world of rapid change, the person who knows themselves deeply becomes unshakable and irreplaceable. External circumstances will continue shifting unpredictably, but your core identity, values, and capabilities provide the stable foundation from which you can adapt to any situation while remaining authentically yourself. This foundation becomes the source of something the world desperately needs. When you focus on becoming your authentic self, you create something the world desperately needs but rarely receives. Your genuine contributions, your unique perspective, your authentic leadership. This isn't selfishness disguised as personal development. This is recognizing that the best gift you can give others is the fully realized version of who you are meant to be. Start today with one simple act of self-focus. Try a digital detox per Digital 2025 stats, showing 20% reduction in burnout with tech breaks. Set one boundary that protects your energy. Say no to something that drains you, so you can say yes to something that energizes you. Name one boundary you'll set today, supported by research that says 12% of burnout is prevented by digital boundaries. In a world designed to distract you from yourself, choosing to focus inward becomes the ultimate act of rebellion.